Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there. Greetings, welcome to this next episode of the Guitar Smarts podcast. Now this week Kiran and I are just having a general chit chat about a number of things that are on our mind, what we've been listening to, general guitar maintenance, my neglected Fender Strat, Kiran's expanding guitar collection and guitar and gear acquisition syndrome, and also my innate tightness when it comes to buying gear. Anyway, if you want to come and follow us on our social media, then you can find us on Facebook at Facebook/Guitar Smarts, or on Instagram as well, where you can find us at Guitar_Smarts. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast app. We're available on Spotify, Apple, Google, all of those places. Anyway, let's get to it. How are you, dude? You well?
I am good, mate. I am good. It's been a good week, nonetheless. It's Friday, which is always a pleasure because it means you and I have a chat, and it means I can kind of get out and do a bit more exercise, get some fresh air, and forget about the fact for a few minutes that I'm in lockdown and have been for the last year.
Oh, no. It's madness. We'll get through it though.
We'll get it.
Exactly. And I've had a good week too. It's been, I've been listening to a lot of music this week, a lot of new music, and enjoying kind of, a good thing about working from home is I feel like I can sit and just kind of zone out a bit more than I would when I'm in the office. I've been listening to a lot of music. I haven't played guitar at all this week. I don't know about you. I don't know if you've picked up the guitar much, but
I've just in terms of maintenance, actually. I've done a bit of maintenance on some of the guitars this week, but work's been a bit manic.
Same.
I'll have weeks where I'll just do more maintenance stuff to the guitars that I own. So just get them all tuned up, change strings on ones that need changing, maybe do a little bit of setup work on some that, where I think I just need to adjust the truss rod on that one. It's been a while, that kind of stuff. So it's been a bit of a week of maintenance with guitars, which I find relaxing as well as just sitting down and noodling. But and it kind of ebbs and flows between doing some guitar maintenance and some setup work and kind of spending time doing guitars in that way for a week. And then the next week it'll be like, no, I really need to play this week and just learn a new piece or learn a new exercise. So I think I've got that coming next week. I think I can feel it building where I need to really do some playing next week.
I feel exactly the same. I feel like I haven't played enough, and I think I've been too busy using the state of my guitars as an excuse for not playing them. Although actually the Les Paul's in good nick now. I spent some time on that, getting that kind of not set up. I've never really, and this is another subject for us to talk about at some point, which is what a guitarist should know about how to maintain their own instrument. And I don't know where I am on that. I don't know if I'm like most guitarists. So I suspect I don't know enough, which is terrible. But the Strat still needs a lot of TLC, and I haven't picked that up. The only time I ever pick the Strat up now is to take the dust off of it that it's collecting, which is a shame because I love that guitar. But yeah, I feel the same and definitely need to grab the guitars next week and spend a bit more time doing some playing, doing some practicing, just jam along to some backing tracks or something, just play. But I've got a list of things I need to sort the pedal board out because I've kind of tore it apart recently, whilst tidying up. So a noisy power supply, I think, which I need to sort out on the pedal board. Just need to clean things out. I need to sort my strings out, get everything back in the case, because I don't know when gigging's going to start again. I don't think it's going to be for a while, but I keep thinking, what if next week I got the call from somebody saying, need you to dep for a gig that's still going ahead, and I'm like, well, actually, I'm really not prepared anymore like I used to be after this year of lockdown. So, I really need to get on top of the maintenance game on my guitars for sure. But playing as well, I need to do some more playing. and get my fingers moving again.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a good release, and it's a good outlet, especially during lockdown, to just kind of detach yourself from reality for a while and just kind of get into playing and learning some new stuff. But for me as well, if the guitar isn't, and I know a decent amount and do a lot of setup work as well, if the guitar isn't behaving for me in the way that it needs to, then I'd prefer to spend some time getting the guitar straight before I then start playing on it. And fortunately, I've got plenty of guitars to kind of play with, so there's always some that are in various states of being either modded or set up, and some that are just there ready to pick up and play. We need to get that Strat of yours sorted.
We really do. If I can get it to you at some point when it's safe to get it to you, then I mean, it's not a priority at the moment, but yeah, definitely at some point.
Yeah.
Just needs a little bit of bit of the expert touch, that you have. But what's on your kind of agenda for doing things with your instruments? You mentioned then just modifications and stuff. Have you got what have you got planned for your guitars?
So there's a couple of things that's going on with my guitar collection, as it were, at the moment. There is the need to sell at least one of them, I think. I've not sold some of my guitars for a long time, and I've just been amassing them. And I kind of looked at them all the other day and went, now, which ones would I save in the event of a fire? After my children and wife, obviously, right? Which ones, provided the house wasn't like a fully inflamed, engulfed ball of kind of molten metal.
See, I thought
and wood.
being a guitarist, what you'd do if your house was burning down, you'd say, kids and wife, get out of the house, but carry one of these whilst you're on your way.
Quite. I mean, it kind of depends how on fire the house is, doesn't it? Really,
it's true.
But that's my kind of game that I play with myself occasionally. Which ones are coming out of the door with me first, and which ones, unfortunately, are gonna be left to insurance claims, right? And so you go through that process, and I kind of realised actually all of these guitars, bar one, have got sentimental value and or are really great guitars that I do play.
That's a good point. I was just going to ask then, is it sentiment over value? What's that?
For sure. For some of them, yeah. For some of them, absolutely. Right. I've got a double-necked SG, right, which I have never had the ego, courage, or either just sheer kind of balls to take to even a jam night. Right? Who is gonna turn up with a double-necked SG?
Well, you'll just be asked to play Stairway to Heaven. That's all
I do play.
You'll stand up and somebody will go, Stairway then? So sorry to interrupt this super interesting conversation. However, if you've made it this far, you should probably subscribe to the Guitar Smarts podcast. You can do that in your favourite podcast app. Go and do that now, and then come back to the show. Let's get back to it. Cool. So, Kiran, you teased me previously about this guitar you've ordered.
Yes.
Right. Tell me more. But don't tell me. Tell me more, but don't tell me.
Well, this is the thing. I don't know why I'm making it a surprise for you, because it's a present for me.
Keep it a surprise though, because I do want to guess. There's a big part of me that's like, I want to see if I can guess what it is you've ordered without you telling me.
I think you probably would be able to guess if you did some research on stuff that's come out recently or coming out things. It's a guitar. It isn't anything particularly weird and wonderful, but it's something that I've been after in a particular finish and spec for a while that I haven't been able to get hold of. And so I'd heard some rumours that it might be coming out, and so I promptly got on the phone to Guitar Village, my kind of chosen guitar shop that I spend a lot of time and money at, and said to the guys there that I know well, look, can you find out what's happening if this finish is coming out on this guitar, because I'd be really interested, and if it is coming out, I'll definitely have one. So they said, yeah, look, we'll dig into it, we'll speak to the rep, and we'll see what we can find out. But yeah, at the moment we can't see anything available to order on this, or indeed if it is being made.
But you were more in the know than the guitar shop, weren't you?
Well,
you had your ear to the tracks before they did.
Yeah, a little bit. I think the guy that I spoke to there, who I know reasonably well over the years, he'd kind of heard some similar rumours as well. He was like, I've kind of seen and heard the same thing that you have, but I've got as much information as you, and that's this rumour that's floating around. And so he was like, look, we'll speak in, again, and I'll let you know what I find out. So I didn't think much of it. Other than his promise to give me a call, but I didn't expect certainly within a week or two for him to come back to me and go, right, I think we've found what's going on. And he actually the plot thickens a little bit. He hadn't heard from the manufacturer directly, but what he was able to do was try and decipher some of the guitars that they had coming into the store by their product and serial numbers, and what it might be that they had a couple of on order was what I was after. So he was like, I think we've got some coming based on the serial numbers and how they're being described. So, but it's not definite. So anyway, I said, look, see what you can find out. If it's coming, I'll have one. So I've paid my deposit. It's going to be coming, but that was 4 or 5 months ago, right? And by the time this podcast comes out, and certainly by the time you see the guitar, this will be no great secret, right? This was a great secret for me 4 or 5 months ago, when it wasn't supposed to exist. But now, you can get hold of it if you want to. So, but because of Brexit, because of COVID, etc., my guitar hasn't arrived yet. So now I'm just waiting.
Painful.
Now I'm just waiting, and I'm talking myself out, of it as well.
Don't do it. Don't do that. Don't talk yourself out of it. That's what I do. And I've said this before. For me, wanting to get a guitar, going to a guitar shop or anything like that is a painful experience. It genuinely is. And I want to say, especially if I go with my wife, only because Lucy has this innate ability to just, why don't you try that one? And then I immediately fall in love with whatever it is she just says. Like the last time that happened was probably 5-6 years ago. We went into a guitar shop in, I think it was a guitar in Epsom, I think it was. We were, over there for whatever reason, and we popped in. I was just having a stroll around, and she pointed out this Gretsch. I've never really got into Gretsch guitars at all. She pointed out this Gretsch, I think it was the G5622T in Georgia green. So it was like a double cutaway. I
love the way you said, I think it was this, and then just recited the exact model number. Brilliant.
It was exactly that. So it was from their Electromatic range. It wasn't even like a top of the line Gretsch. We're talking £700. Again, not an expensive instrument at all, but absolutely beautiful. And I tried it out and was just like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And I almost bought it, almost got it. But we were, again, I stood there my brain goes, think of all the other things you can do with that money that would immediately benefit, whether it's your family or the home or anything. I taught myself out of every kind of, thing that I kind of want. And then I spend years looking at it and thinking, well, maybe I'll get it next year. We've got carpets to buy. We just ordered carpets for the house, so now I'm like, get a new guitar next year instead. But next year we might need, something else. I don't know, painting somewhere. But yeah, so I have this horrible experience now of all my recent experiences of going to guitar stores or music stores are just, it's me going in there, finding something, liking it, talking myself out of it, and leaving pissed off.
Leaving angry with yourself.
Exactly. So I don't do it anymore. But still I will do eventually, obviously at some point. I deserve it. I know I do. But it's hard, isn't it? Especially if you've committed to something before you've even seen it. So that's the astounding thing for me, is because, well, I guess if you go and try them out and you don't like either of them, then you'll just You know,
I won't go through with that. And the guys at the shop were very cool with that, because I kind of spoke to them about that as well. I said, look, you and I know guitar's a guitar, and for whatever reason, if it doesn't give me that vibe or I just don't connect with it, it's a significant sum of money. I'm like, am I, you know, I presume that, you know, I'm not obliged to then, you know, pay the balance if it's just not working. And they were like, yeah, of course. Like this is a holding deposit, which means, you know, we'll give you a call as soon as it arrives in, you come and try it, and it's reserved for you, right? But if it's not your cup of tea or it's not quite what you had in mind, then no issue, right? And that's any good guitar shop should be able to do that. So that's what I've been reminding myself of. But I tell you what, it's this podcast and chatting to you, that's like some sort of cathartic experience, which has made me kind of reflect over the last 4 or 5 months since putting my deposit down, going, what, you know, I could buy 50 Harley Bensons instead.
So what you're saying is we're trying to do some kind of podcast, but inadvertently we're giving each other therapy, right? Is that it?
Well, maybe in some ways, right? Because, you know, I hear myself talking about our philosophy out loud, which is, you know, use the gear that you've got to the best abilities and spend time on your practicing. And, you know, but it's, you know, it's the never ending thing of a guitarist, isn't it? To lust after the dream guitar. And this is definitely in the top. This is in the top of dream guitars for me. And also that whole guitar acquisition thing, but it's a lot of money, right? And it's kind of like, well, do I really need another guitar? So I've kind of resided myself that I will do as I should do, which is go and try it and not just go in there to go, well, if it's 80% of what I wanted and hoped it would be, then that's good enough and I'll get it. Yeah. I've said to myself, it's got to be absolutely on the money and I've got to love it. And if I don't, then buy something else.
Yes, and you should. And I hope I haven't implanted any kind of, you know, guilt into you because of the way I am with things. I mean, genuinely, for me, it's mainly been because of circumstance over the years. Just, you know, when I have been able to afford something, you know, and also being, you know, having, you know, it just. I'm like that anyway. I'm innately tight, you know, in a way.
Yeah.
I like a bargain. So a lot of the time for me, it's if I find something I really like, whether it's inexpensive or not, I tend to talk myself out of it and then maybe try and find a way to afford it differently. You know, can I get rid of, you know, can I give something up to help afford something? And sometimes I don't bother because I'm not really an impulsive buyer. So that's why I don't really have a huge collection of things. I mean, I've had more guitars than I have now. It isn't that I've, you know, I mean, I only have 2. I should say, you know, to anybody listening wondering what guitars we have, I have a Les Paul and a Strat. Basically, I have an Epiphone Les Paul, which was a 21st birthday present, and I have a Fender Strat, which was a 30th birthday present. So yeah. I can't wait for my 40th birthday in a couple of years' time.
So the guys at Guitar Village used to get quite excited because I went through a habit of buying really expensive guitars from them every time my wife was pregnant and we were expecting a new child. So they used to buy a guitar to commemorate the birth of the next kid. So there was a period of time where every time I walked into the shop, they would look at me and go, is she pregnant? I go, calm down, guys. Not today. Today we are just browsing. Exactly. Today we are just browsing.
When they're giving you like ideas of places to take her for dinner, you know, romantic retreats. Have you thought about this?
How many kids are you planning?
That's it, yeah. That's it, yeah. There's a new Gibson out. Why don't you go on a weekend away?
I mean, I like having different guitars to play with and things like that. But you know, invariably, you don't need loads. You don't need loads of guitars. It's just, you know.
No, you're right, and also I guess, you know, you are very much into, I want to say modifications, but you're very much into guitar maintenance and luthiery. How do you say it?
Yeah, luthiery.
Is that right? Did I say it right? I feel like I've just chewed something.
It's a weird word.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I know you've been very much into that over the years as well. So, do you think about that when you're looking at guitars that you like? as well? Do you think about the maintenance or the things you can do to them? And we've spoken about that PRS style guitar that you've purchased before and how good a bed that is for modifications and maybe even for people to just learn about how to maintain a guitar as well. Do you think about that more now when you're looking at guitars?
I do when I look at when I look at customers' guitars when I'm doing stuff up for them, because I can see what could make a good guitar or even a bad guitar much better with a few simple mods and some tweaks and things. I have tried to buy a few inexpensive guitars like that Harley Benton, like the vintage AFD Paradise, which is again another great guitar. I have bought them for modding purposes, but I haven't got around to modding them because innately they're just good at what they do. They just needed a decent setup, and actually the basic components of them are actually fine. I tell you what it has done though in terms of purchasing guitars is it's made me really critical about workmanship, quality control, and again, things that I can see where the workmanship has gone into a guitar and will justify its price versus going, that's just a price because of a brand or a name, and actually the inherent workmanship and quality and final setup isn't there on a guitar. So it makes me more critical before I purchase a guitar. There's been a few guitars. I went to Denmark Street when I had a lunch break from work before lockdown, and just had a mosey around some of the shops and ended up trying a couple of guitars. And there was one guitar that I just loved. It had a real vibe to it, and it was just great. And I was just really enjoying playing it. And but the overall workmanship on it and the way it had been constructed and some of the bits of it that were still a bit rough and ready, and I could have fixed it up and could have improved some of those things and put a bit more money into it, but invariably it wasn't then going to be a cost-effective thing for what they were already charging for this guitar. So even though it played great and it sounded good, it wasn't put together in a way that really justified the price. There were still some things that I'd have to go away and fix and tweak and make right and spend a bit more money on it. And then you just go, well, I don't think it's worth it then. So I think what having a good knowledge of guitar setup and construction can do is make you very critical about where you spend your money and what's worth spending money on, and also help you weed through some of the duff instruments, right? So as advice for somebody that is going out and buying a guitar who's relatively inexperienced and doesn't know quite what they're looking at or purchasing, always take someone with you that knows and has been playing for a little while that can tell you, this is a good guitar, or actually this one needs a bit of work and a bit of setup to it, or actually may have something not quite right with it that isn't fixable. I've seen guitars with neck angles not set correctly and they're on sale, and the strings are fouling on the back of the tail piece or the kind of bridge in a way that they shouldn't. I've seen guitars where some of the fret ends are just so bad that or unlevel straight out of the box, where you just go, well, that just needs a full fret level and recrown straight away. So that's fixable, but again, it's another chunk of change. I
think that's something. If I was out there now whether I'm a beginner guitarist or just somebody more seasoned who was looking for a second instrument or third instrument or whatever, if I'm looking in kind of that sub £500 or sub £300 range, I should factor in the cost of a good setup with a good luthier as well into that, because I think for a lot of guitar brands, that's the only difference between a £500 guitar and a £1,000 guitar.
Completely.
The hardware might be slightly different. You might have some better hardware on the more expensive guitar, but a lot of that money that you're spending extra is in the cost to the business of having human hands on the guitar for a considerable amount of time doing some proper quality control. Whereas the cheaper guitars, there's less human time that guitar has in being checked over properly for all those little details, fret ends and, things like that, the finishes, it has the angle of the neck been set up correctly, truss rod adjustments and action height and things like that. Those little things get very little time spent on the cheaper guitars. And actually the only difference between a slightly more expensive guitar and that is just that time. So, I guess there's money to be saved if you go for a cheaper guitar and then spend 100, 150 quid on, with a luthier and say, do everything you can to make that as good as it can be. Or if you prefer the more expensive guitar and you can afford it, go for that one as well. But it's funny, isn't it? That sub £1,000 guitar kind of area. There's a lot of bargains to be had. I think there's a lot of overpriced stuff to be had as well. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just quality control.
I think if you're spending over £1,000 on a guitar, which I've done that a few times, you are paying for a brand, and you're paying for some components or finishes or kind of additional elements to the spec that are definitely things that are nice to have rather than essential to have to make that an incrementally better guitar, right? That's about the price point where and don't get me wrong, I've spent, a good amount of money purchasing plenty of guitars that are well above the £1,000 price range, but that's because of, what that guitar is, who's made it, in which factory it's come from, what finish it is, what type of pickups it's got in it, what inlay work it's got, all of the different things that are just then personal preference, taste, and things that you want to treat yourself with. Under £1,000, I would say that's where you can have some real fun and get some really great guitars and do some modding to make them, amazing. If you go really cheap, you're going to have to spend a lot in setup work and potentially changing out some of the components to make it good. But I think what you've said that should resonate with people is, do not overlook some inexpensive guitars before they've been properly set up, because, something that costs 300-400 quid, 250 quid, you might play it and you go, yeah, it doesn't play that great, it doesn't feel that great, and therefore it doesn't sound that great, and therefore it doesn't give me that vibe. I promise you, if I spent some time on that guitar, or any setup tech spent some time on that guitar, you don't even need a luthier, you just need somebody that can set up a guitar properly. You would think differently about that guitar. It still may not be the guitar of that you wanted it to be, but a decent setup will transform a cheap guitar into being something really good, which you can then make a decision on as to what you do with the pickups or the machine heads or the wiring or what have you. So yeah, definitely when you spend money on a guitar at any price point, really, make sure that there's some money left in the budget to have it properly set up. And indeed, most decent, reputable guitar shops will set it up to your specification and give it a proper thorough check over before they sell it to you in any case. Right.
And to continue having it set up, I guess, regularly, especially if you play a lot. If you're a pro, which we are not, if you're a pro guitarist, you're probably having your guitar set up almost on a monthly basis, I imagine, if you're gigging day in, day out, or if you used to gig day in, day out. Guitars, they're like cars, they need regular maintenance. They're being used, they're mechanical things. They need time spent on them.
Totally.
So why expect it to be like that straight out of the box,
Oh, it won't. Guitars are made of wood and are susceptible to changes in temperature, humidity, and all kinds of things. And truss rods will need tweaking, dependent on the environment the guitar's in. But yeah, heavily used gigging instruments, things that wear and tear, like frets and to some extent nut slots and some of the electronics and pots and stuff like that. That's just proper wear and tear, and that will have a regular kind of churn over with what gets chopped in and chopped out. But in terms of just general setup and tweaking, truss rods will need tweaking relatively frequently, just keep it in check, because guitars have a I'm convinced, a living entity, and that just responds to the environment, right? And and, you need to keep on top of that.
It's funny, isn't it? They are organic things that
Totally.
we shouldn't just think are fixed all the time. But how do you do that? How do you learn how to do that as well? It can't all just be experimentation, maintaining a guitar.
Yeah, but start on a cheap guitar and don't be afraid to experiment, and have a good book that's telling you how to do things, or YouTube video that's showing you credibly how to do things. That's part of how I learned. Plus having some good mentors and some courses that I went on, and then you kind of accrue knowledge and confidence. But there does come a point where you just go, well, I've got to give it a go. So your Strat, for example, I could quite possibly coach you through over a Zoom call how to set that up, the basics of it, to get it playing better than it is now. I'm
confident I could do that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing for me is I don't think I have the tools to do it. I don't.
Okay.
A lot of the things that I would need, measuring tools for setting string height and things like that. I don't necessarily have. Maybe I should just order them. It's not expensive stuff. But we should do that. We should do that definitely. And actually, that would be a good podcast. Listening to me fool around with a guitar, twanging, ping, oops, broken that. What do I do? One of your prized possessions is a guitar you built yourself.
Yeah.
Spec'd and built yourself, right? So tell us about that. What was the process of that for you?
So the process of that for me was just to go on a course and learn more, in my quest to become at some point in my life an actual luthier, which I'm not. I'm a tech. I'm a setup guy, and I can do some very decent setups, and I can do some good fretwork and some assembling of component parts, but I can't as yet take a block of wood and start carving a guitar out of it and then give you a guitar. That's for down the road when I've got a full workshop and have the skills to do that. So this was done. So I did this a good few years ago now, where I was wanting to get to a point where I could take already manufactured component parts that, from a box, and put it all together in a really competent way. The final setup I'd been good at for a long time, but actually, getting really good at all the wiring, getting really good at all the fret leveling and recrowning, making my own nuts out of bone and getting those done properly and
Did
correctly.
you do that as part of that guitar? You made your own? Wow, okay.
Yeah, and I do frequently now as a result of what I learned off that course. When somebody comes to me for a new nut, I don't just order one and then stick it in and then cut the slots to height. I make it out of bone for them.
Wow. That's impressive. What's the? I've never experienced if there's any real. What's the difference? Do you really feel or hear a difference between a bone nut and something cheaper that you might get, like a plastic nut, or is it more to do with stability, or?
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. Some of the kind of composite plastic nuts that you get. Like Gibson are using a version of a plastic at the moment in their for their nuts, and they're very good. They're kind of similar-ish to the tonal qualities that you'll get from bone. So they're not bad, but on a cheap guitar, the plastic that you get is like a really cheap, rubbishy plastic sometimes, which you just think, no, that's got to come out. So there are some artificial materials and synthetic materials. Tusk is one of them. With a Q. True Bone is another one, which is again a synthetic material that is supposed to replicate the properties of bone. But cow bone, cattle bone was used for years in instruments for the nuts because it was felt to have a more resonant property to it that would improve the tone of an instrument over plastic, and I think that is true. To some extent, there is almost like a self-lubricating property of bone, or in that it has a very low kind of friction kind of component to it, which means the strings slide, provided the nut slots are cut properly, they slide a little bit better through it and don't ping or stick there as they could do in a poorly cut plastic nut. But it is personal preference. Some people like metal and brass nuts, and one of my Strats is an American Deluxe with a metal roller nut, and it sounds fantastic, you know. So again, it's personal preference, but for me, I do like the sound of a bone nut, and I like working with the material itself in the way that it carves and the way that it responds and the way that it cuts and how it looks in the final guitar. I think it looks really smart and really nice. So yeah, that was one of the things that I learned on this guitar course. But it was I basically went to do that course with a guy called James down in East Sussex, West Sussex kind of area. Who's an amazing luthier, a genuine luthier, but who runs these courses, guitar tech courses, and he taught me a phenomenal amount about some of the bits that I wasn't as comfortable in doing, particularly around fretwork at that time, which I now am really, really confident in doing. What I didn't expect was to end up with a guitar that would be so good and sound so nice that I would end up playing and gigging it as much as I did. I just thought if I get a guitar out of it and learn some skills, that's great. But I didn't expect the guitar that I produced to be one of my main instruments as a result, and it certainly is. So I definitely recommend going on one of these courses to anyone that wants to improve their knowledge of guitar setup, but also as a really cost-effective way to build an instrument that is going to have a huge amount of sentimental value and be worth and sound more than the individual component parts, because the parts for this guitar probably came to around 500 quid. But I'd easily put it up against an American standard Strat, you know, costing $900 to £1,000 in terms of overall quality. It's a really decent guitar. You know, it's got really good expensive pickups.
That's what I was going to ask as well. Is what does it stand up against? You know, and that's interesting. You know, I mean, a US Fender Strat is, you know, it's £1,000 plus. You've made a guitar for half of that, but with the assistance and, you know, through the process of working on it with a luthier who's taught you some really key skills to, as you said before, as we said about cheaper guitar and making it more of a, you know, an expensive feeling guitar. Sometimes it is just the setup and the care and attention that goes into the quality of some final details. And I guess this is the next stage up from that, which is building your own guitar using parts, but putting that same care and attention into the details and the quality of it. And then there you go, for half the price of something that it is equivalent to, you've got you know, a really, not just a really good instrument that could, you know, be gigged in any situation, but something that's unique to you as well, something that's of great sentimental value to you. You've put a lot of time and effort and hours into making that guitar. Yeah,
it's great. It's hugely rewarding to be able to do that, but it also kind of demystifies some of the guitar building process for you, to give you, again, another level of confidence at experimenting and modding and playing around with bits and pieces. I mean, I'm still blown away by set neck construction in guitars and, you know, glued in neck guitars, and guitars with, you know, proper binding and the process of you know, doing edge binding on guitars and stuff like that, because I think that is a genuine, you know, kind of art form. But, you know, bolting together a guitar now from component parts, be it something like an S-style guitar or a T-style guitar, to me, that's kind of like, why would I buy a Strat again off the shelf, even though I've got some, you know, Fender Strats that I bought prior to building this one? If I wanted another Strat, I'd just build it myself now and, you know, customize it to my exact needs and save a boatload of cash in the process. It's a really brilliant design, the Fender Strat, where you can, you know, put it together from different bits and get a really good guitar.
But it was clearly designed for mass production, you know, in that way, because, like you say, it is kind of template parts bolted together. And again, like you say, a Strat is just such a superb machine for you know, making music on. But it's not in the same realm as like a 335 or a Les Paul, which is much more kind of traditional, you know, in its DNA, you know, much more luthier built, kind of, like you say, those different techniques that are very specific to instrument making, you know, set necks and through necks and you know, carved tops and things like that, you know, buck matching wood for the for those the flame or curly maple tops and things like that. There's so much in those instruments, and a Strat is very much a tool, as beautiful as they are. Great place to start with building a guitar, though. And that's actually, even a Telecaster, is even, anybody could build a Telecaster, A one pickup Telecaster would be, a day's work, and I'm sure it would sound amazing. I'd love a one pickup Tele, like an Esquire type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So why? So have you not been interested before in learning more about guitar maintenance and setup, or is it something that's been like a barrier in your mind to, in terms of confidence at doing it, or is it just because you've invested that time quite wisely, I would say, into playing and getting more proficient on the instrument itself, and leaving the setup to somebody else to do?
That's a good question. It's a mixture of things for me, definitely. One of them is just negligence, I guess. I forget that they need that kind of maintenance we spoke about. For me, it's if I can pick it down from the wall and play it and it feels fine, I forget that it still needs maintenance at some point. I forget that it needs some care and attention. And then when it feels wrong, then you go, I haven't had this set up for 3 years. I haven't changed the strings in a couple of months or something if I've been playing regularly. So a lot of it is just out of that neglect, back of the mind thing. Confidence-wise, I do feel confident for most part I could do the basics. I think, I could do truss rod adjustments, string height adjustments, and intonation I've done before, no problems. That's easy on a Strat. Anything with individual saddles that are adjustable, it's easy enough to do the intonation, right? Things like that I have the confidence to do. It's things like, both the guitars I have now are, the Les Paul is nearly 20 years old, and the Strat is, about 10 years old. So they're both at a stage where actually they could do with a fret level and polish, recrowning and stuff like that. And, I feel confident I could give it a go, but I don't know if they're the right guitars to give it a go on, given the fact that they're the only guitars I own. And they're both of sentimental value. And what's the worst that could happen? They need a refret, fine. But that's a fairly expensive procedure to have to go through when neither of them are really in a state that they actually need a refret. They just need a fret polish, right? Fret leveling, should I say, actually. They need, just the process of leveling the frets and then recrowning and tidying up, polishing. Which, again, with the right tools, with a leveling bar and whatnot, I'm sure I could give it a go. But I'd rather get somebody who's good at that, or at least, is trained to do that, to do it, than me. But if I had the right guitar, I'd give it a go.
I know, I'd agree with that. I think, so I have learned how to do it, and I've learned from a few different people, and I've kind of practiced and got to a level where I'm confident doing a fret level and recrown on any, price point of instrument or any style of instrument. But that's taken a number of years, and buying some, not necessarily expensive, but certainly specialised tools to do that. And I certainly wouldn't encourage anyone to just have a go at doing that. Unless it's a really cheap guitar and you genuinely got a passion to learn more and make mistakes and get better at doing it. I don't think that's one of the jobs you should just necessarily have a go at, particularly on your guitars, which are, your prized instruments. So, if you're on a journey to wanting to become better at guitar setup and maintenance, or indeed, have got the desire to become a luthier at some point, then, on that journey, you will definitely need to learn how to do that. And then that's fine. And, that's the journey that I'm kind of on. But for your kind of gigging guitarist, I don't think that fret leveling and recrowning comes in under the list of basic setup things that you should know how to do.
No, and I agree. That should be something you leave up to the expert.
Yeah.
But I tell you what I have done to my Les Paul, and I have told you this previously, and this was very much a impulse thing, but I sanded the neck down on my Les Paul. And this is after owning it for, 15, 16 years. I decided, do you know what? I think I'm going to try, I'm just going to do it. I don't want that kind of, glossy finish on the neck anymore. I'm going to sand it down. I'm going to oil it and just see what it's like. And I love it. It's amazing. Oh, it feels so good to play. I mean, it just feels more comfortable. And I want to say smoother. Clearly, it's not smoother than something that's got a gloss finish, you know. But a gloss finish, you know, the thing that comes to mind, a lot of people say sticky. You know, a gloss finish kind of neck can feel sticky. I wouldn't say it felt sticky to me. Maybe just because I was used to it, but it definitely feels just more comfortable to play without that finish on it. And I just one evening did it entirely by hand, you know, and just went from like a fairly heavy grit sandpaper right down to, you know, I think it was like 400 or 600, which you can get a lot smoother than that, obviously, sandpaper, but that got me a really, really smooth finish. And then I oiled it. And it just feels fantastic. It just feels great. It's something I would recommend doing, actually, is if you go to a guitar shop and you try something and it's got like a satin finish or a natural finish or an oiled neck, and you think it feels really comfortable, it's not actually that difficult to do. It just takes a bit of elbow grease. You know, I found just to very carefully over a bit of time, just keep sanding it down until you get through the finish, you know, and try and do that as evenly as you can over the back of the neck. And then obviously use changing grades in sandpaper to get the finish as smooth as possible, and then protect the wood with, you know, some oil. And yeah, it's transformed the instrument for me. It really has.
It's quite a common mod that people do. I mean, it invariably happens naturally over time on guitars that are finished with a nitrocellulose kind of finish, or indeed just a kind of oiled lighter kind of style lacquer. Those kind of finishes kind of continue to thin out and off gas, as they call it, over and get progressively thinner, and just with playing they kind of wear through to the wood. So you'll see a lot of old Les Pauls and some of the old Fenders that were nitro where that has happened through play wear, and that's that road worn, played in feeling that feels really nice when you play a guitar like that, and people go, oh, it feels really well played in. And what it is it's that kind of more that feeling against your skin and the actual wood of the instrument, rather than, you know, a layer of lacquer, right? But on the guitar that you did it to, which again it's completely, you know, cool to do it to, that's a polyurethane hard lacquer that doesn't age or doesn't change over time, really, unless, you know, you're talking about, you know, a long period of time. But generally speaking, even
mine hasn't aged at all.
No, it won't.
It's got a few battle scars, you know, from where I've kind of scratched it and dropped it, whatever. But other than that, yeah, you're right. It's still the same colour, still the same finish.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. So you've had to go some good guns on that to get through the clear coat, and then through the kind of different levels of colour poly that are underneath that. But it's doable for sure, as you've proven, and it looks cool. It gives the guitar a cool vibe, and it gives you that connection to the actual wood of the neck in a way that makes it really, really fun to play.
And speaking as somebody who's an engineer as a day job, and not necessarily someone who's experienced in doing that, but I would say to anyone, it took some time and effort to do it by hand, but in my mind, I wouldn't recommend anybody did it any other way. Because if you tried to do it with a machine, some kind of sander, I think you need to enable yourself with some sensitivity to the shape of what it is you're sanding. You don't want to change the shape of the neck whilst you're doing it accidentally because you've used some kind of tool like a electric sander that, you know, takes away the feel of what you're doing but gets through the finish really quicker. You don't want to end up with a P-shaped neck. Not even like a V or a C, you know, just go, oops, it's now a B shape. You don't want to do something silly like that. Definitely do it by hand and take some time to do it, so the whole time you can still feel the shape of the neck and you're not changing it adversely. But I guess all you're doing is going through the finish. Once you hit wood, then you should leave it alone, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another interesting conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. Come back for more next week. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to this podcast on your favourite podcast app so you never miss a show. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/guitarsmarts. Like us on Instagram at guitar_smarts. Anyway, have a cracking week. Speak to you soon.